Raised your fist and thundered, "Donavete no chanmal." Plates trembled, water spilled, and we froze, waiting for your lightning hand to strike. Paranoia, which he was all his life, can be useful in uncertain times. My father knew early on that no barbarism was too far-fetched for the Nazis. He forced my mother, living the coddled life of the assimilated Jew in the Sudetenland, to flee Czechoslovakia. Along with her, his mother, and my sister born in France, en route to America, he evaded advancing troops, bribing those who needed bribing, and ultimately landed with a detour to Brazil in Wilmington, Delaware, where I was born. And that poem I read before continues. How could you know, the you being my father, how could you know the shadows of those who died rose at night to do their lone soft shoe? And I, how could I know when I played at your feet, you still heard boots? He couldn't convince my mother's parents to leave. My grandfather would say, "What would I do, sell sausages in a foreign land?" And so they perished. My grandfather in a boxcar en route to Auschwitz. My grandmother gassed. My young, dashing uncle stayed behind to care for his parents. He survived because he knew how to weld. I knew nothing of this. In fact, I was 20 before I learned my mother's name, Blanca. Actually, she didn't know when she was carrying me if her parents were alive or dead. Jewish tradition forbids naming a child after a living relative because it might confuse the angel of death. But the first letter, the Holocaust was never talked about in my house. And by the way, you know, I hear from other second, third generations, this is not at all uncommon. The only thing worse than that is if it's talked about too much, and that happens too. The Holocaust was the uninvited guest. Greedy and sly, it gobbled up everything. This poem. Even the dead can't keep a secret. They barge in, sit at your table, demanding to be fed. They bang their spoons like children, crying, "Feed me," and you have never prepared enough. I was past 30 when I realized I was a poet. Looking back, I see I had excellent training in reading between the lines, an awareness of how language can obscure as well as reveal, including body language. And I think that any child who grows up in a bilingual home is especially attuned to language for just that reason, even Holocaust or not. But you know, if you're trying to understand what people are saying, you become very attuned to what their body is doing, not what their mouth is saying. My parents spoke French when they didn't want my sister or me to understand. It was their secret language. Of course, when it came time to select a foreign language to study, I chose French. Later, I lived in Paris and even began to dream in French. I'm not exactly trilingual, but I do know that some thoughts and emotions are more fully expressed in one language than another. For instance, how flexible is the language in expressing anger? I have a coffee mug decorated with Shakespearean insults. Flop-eared knave, light of brain, poisonous bunchback toad, canker blossom, a delicious brew of words giving a speaker an abundance of ways to say stupid. And I was thinking of that just on my way here this evening. You know, Trump's "Make America Great Again"? How would you translate that into French, for instance, Carol? Well, you can't say the obvious, which would be "Make America Grand Again." That's fat. Well, it's fat, doesn't mean great. So that's your challenge for this evening. It's just amazing because there are things like that all the time in language. that are impossible, and you have to be really creative. You wouldn't.
Fake news.
Oh yeah, fake news. There are all these puns too, like fake news. There's a little GNUS, fake news. I see some illusions. How did that go? I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to read too much more of this.
Read some of your own work.
Let's see. Curious since childhood about the underbelly of things, I searched for ways to penetrate surface appearance. Access to the unconscious and preconscious through dreams, free association, creating metaphors and images is key. It seems to me that the more languages one knows, the more possibilities exist. Not just for defining the underbelly, but for grasping complexities and shades of meaning. And this is from another poem of mine called The Desire to Be Contained. This is the secret appeal of corners, and why we love the roof, which we see as the lid of a pot. The teeming life inside a house seems wild and uncontained. And this isn't this the reason we love mummies, swaddled in white linen bandages? For isn't dissolution what we fear most? Maybe others would content themselves with appearances. Mr. Frankenbush, a rosy-cheeked, balding millionaire, father of the woman my uncle soon would marry, once pinched my cheek and said, "You're such a good little girl." And I replied, "Oh no, I'm only good on the outside. Inside, I'm very, very bad." I was telling the truth. I eavesdropped, peeped, didn't always change my underwear, and once filched a toy from the corner drugstore.
Nice poem that you read. Anika, you know that?
It's not in here. Well, I'm going to go on to some of these translations, which I have to say I grow to love more and more, and that's because I see how good they are. I mean, if you read them, they really read like they were originally written in English. And that's what Nabokov says is the best kind of translation, as if it were originally written in that language. So I couldn't have done this, of course, without Moshe Dor, who was my Israeli husband. It's all Myra's fault. And I thought I'd read a few of these.
No, we're hiding over here. My arm is getting a little tired.
Somebody young.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just, No.
Can you all hear me?
No. Forgive me. I'm sorry to interrupt your flow, Barbara. He had originally set up some things so that, my arm didn't become the, and I'm sick. I'm a sickie. I've been in surgery. I've been a month in the hospital, the whole bit. Rather than that. Thank you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, this will be a help. That way you can play with
Thank you. For those of you who don't know Richard, he's a madman when it comes to the organizing of things. I just have never seen anything like it. He's on his sickbed, and he's organizing, writing, and calling, and sending out poems, and it's just, you should have seen him in Bulgaria. So here are some Israeli poems, but as I say, I worked with a native speaker, so my literals, my word-for-word translations, I had a native speaker to give that to me. And of course, that makes all the difference. If you can't work from a good literal, then you can't make a good translation. So I like to start with this one because it's so short. And this is by a Druze. That means not an Israeli, not an Arab, but a Druze, and the Druze do fight in the Israeli army, just as a way of saying. And it's so simple. It's called loving you thus. Loving you thus, that you'll be with me when I need you, and not be with me, and not be but with me. And if you desire, be with me, and if not, go away and don't come back. Maya Bejarano is a poet I met on another poetry festival, but it was in Florence. She's Israeli. And the thing about Maya, she had OCD beyond what you can imagine. She was always running, she was always talking, she was this, she was that. You know, the kind of person who kind of gives you a little bit of a headache. So this is her poem, which ironically is called I'm in a Hurry. I'm in a hurry and can't make sweet talk, because my whole body wallows in sweetness, and my tongue has become too mute to respond to your friendly chatter. Along the spine of night, the nut is split, the light that doesn't exit, a pure black air. My thinking isn't clear, my voice wraps long strings into itself, and singing my sweetness are 1,000 dwarfs. They are so small, therefore, you understand, I'm in a hurry, and I can't make sweet talk with you, because my whole body wallows in sweetness. Of course, I have to read one by Moshe. And the title is By the Rivers of Babylon, which has a biblical reference. I want to clasp you to my heart, but my arm won't move. I want to tell you words of love, but my lips won't move. The love in me has let my left hand forget its cunning, and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. What shall I do? I'll hold you with my left arm and keep silent until you hear me. A note about that you wouldn't know, unless you knew your Bible, was the tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. That's how they described how Moses stuttered. That it's the expression. I'm not sure they have a word for stutter, but this is the way it's said. Tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Quite wonderful. And this is by Mordecai Geldman, who is gay. And I think you can tell from the poem, which is quite subtle. Not so subtle. It's called Cafe. At Cafe Milano, which isn't in Milano, a Palestinian waiter prepares coffee for me. He smiles, black eyes glinting as though he can read my mind. Youthful, pagan soccer fans listen to a fat, blonde guy analyze plays from the field. It's evening now, but his eyes still sport purple-tinted sunglasses. A secret signal eliminates everyone. The beautiful, heavily rouged waitress too. And at a deserted cafe, I confront a Palestinian waiter. He sees what I see, and I see his eyes. He sees that my stare is not political. The secret signal eliminates me too. On the way home, the dark, tender with electric lights, I see trailing from a balcony a tangle of roses. And because you met Varda, my good friend, in Plovdiv, I'm going to read a translation of her poem. Apple of Pain. First speech is the speech of love. Let me make of it foundation and roof. Dwell there as in a house of flame. Second speech is the speech of war. One of us lost, staggering under the weight of knowing.